So this is on Kevin Kelly's The Next 5,000 Days of the Web, and he talks about, the big one machine that everything connects to in his concept. And I think he's got some good points with it, because everything is becoming more and more interconnected, and smartphones and all of it. But some of the ways in which he makes this point, I'm not quite sure I agree with. He said something about by 2040 the web will exceed humanity in processing power, and he got this by some calculation of the number of neurons and that the human brain has, comparing it to computer networks. But I don't really, I can't appreciate that he's saying the current machine is equal to one human brain as a unit of measurement. I don't know that once you multiply that it really has any relevancy whatsoever. I think it's kind of, a statistic that doesn't really exist, that he makes up, and just not a helpful way of looking at things, and that's just how I interpret it. But I did think he said, and that, granted, makes me concerned about his other statistics, because I think this one's kind of far-fetched as being useful. But assuming that the rest of them are right, I thought it was interesting. He said that computers and the web is 5% of global electricity is used on that. I thought it was really interesting. And then he was also talking, he had that list of stats that he said it was stuff that was so big that didn't really mean anything to people. And one of those stats applied to my final project, which I thought was interesting. It was that 600 billion RFID tags were in use currently, or when he made the video. And the RFID tags are the radio frequency identifier tags, like they have in books and electronics packaging before you, so you don't take them out of the store without purchasing them first. But I thought that was interesting, and talking about Google and your personal search history, all that, which I think the more information we get, the more interesting the data becomes. And he was saying that, in order to, in the new world that he envisions, in order to have the personalization to the extreme, you've got to be open to having all your data shared. And I think that's, a good argument. And his argument about, he said something, how people are concerned about becoming dependent on smartphones and the internet for, you Google something now if it's, a fact that you don't remember, whereas before you might make a little bit more effort to remember it, but now it's so easy to Google that there's not, any reason to remember useless data. But he comments on how, looking at it in a similar way, we're dependent on the alphabet and text and everything, which I thought was an interesting point, because I hadn't thought about it like that before, being concerned about, people not knowing information because they just figure they'll use Google, and not being able to spell because they're just going to use a word processor, changes like that. But I hadn't thought about it in this light, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And that's that's what he talked about, the embodiment, restructuring, codependency. And I do find it interesting that, the web is becoming more and more in everything, and some of the videos we were watching have been talking about that, just how it's going to be used in your everyday situations. So that's all I got.